is the focus of a new exhibition in Sydney. Joining me live is Foreign Correspondents Association spokesperson Barbara Barkhausen and behind the headline, exhibition curator Raj Suri. Barbara, Raj, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you.
And Barbara, first to you, you're a correspondent based here in Australia and some of your work will be featured in this exhibition. I'd love to know, how is Australia portrayed overseas and what are the main topics of interest for international audiences?
Look, I think in general Australia is portrayed in a very positive light overseas. There was maybe a brief time when the government didn't take climate change that seriously. That was a little bit of a dent, I'd say. But in general, it's very, very positive. And readers love Australian stories, particularly animal stories, human interest stories, science stories, and Australians overcoming hardship. That's also quite popular.
So really human interest stories coming through. Can you talk me through, who do you report back to from Australia?
So I mainly report back to German, Austrian, Swiss media and a newspaper in Luxembourg. So there is a lot of interest in that.
And of the more critical stories, we were speaking before about COVID and the period of lockdown in Melbourne, a difficult time for many people here in Australia, but particularly in Victoria. How was that whole, part of history really looked upon by the world?
That was actually quite interesting because there was so much interest in Germany, Austria and Switzerland in particular, because they handled it differently to Australia. And particularly when we had the Novak Djokovic saga, I was in the German news basically on a daily basis because they wanted to understand why did Australia take that approach to the topic and why was it so strict. So that was of a lot of interest. Yeah.
Oh, we all remember that Djokovic saga. We probably crossed paths down in Melbourne at that time when I was down there as well. What about Australia's stance on China? I know you covered the Pacific as well.
Yes, I've noticed that after the Sydney Olympics, the interest in Australia seemed to wane a little bit. And you had, newsrooms moving their correspondents to Bangkok or Singapore. So it's lots of freelancers that work from Australia these days. But then with the China situation sort of changing and China becoming more powerful and also being louder in its approach to how it handled political topics in the world, it became all of a sudden an interesting region again. And I've noticed that there is, Australia is in a geopolitically interesting position here, and particularly with China being the biggest trading partner and the US being a very close ally. That makes it an interesting situation, and Europe is always interested in hearing how Australia is handling that sort of tightrope.
Your role would be incredibly fascinating, very exciting being a foreign correspondent, but what are the challenges of reporting from Australia?
Look, it is exciting, and I've done really exciting stories where you go out in the outback for reporting and everything like that, but most of the time it's just lonely because you do sit at home at your computer and don't have a big newsroom colleagues, so that can get quite lonely. So that's why the Foreign Correspondents Association is a real asset for us to have. And the other thing is that it is actually quite difficult to get politicians to talk to you as a foreign correspondent. There is just no votes, when from readers in Germany or Austria or Switzerland, for example. And as a result, it is quite challenging to actually get a politician to talk to us. And, strength in numbers, again, with the association can help, but not always, So we would be quite keen to talk to Penny Wong, for example.
So a call out now from Barbara to Penny Wong. She wants an interview. Perfect. And also, Raj, can you tell us about the exhibition behind the headlines? What can people expect?
Sure, Julia. Look, first of all, it was a huge challenge to put something together of 40 years. And that is something, you really can't sum it up in 3 walls at the UTS. So we need sort of more space for that. But then what we have at the exhibition is, obviously, we've got the founders who were, top reporters from Reuters, AP, photographers and journalists. So there are portraits, some of the portraits of the founders with their photo essays. We have a Hiroshima survivor there, who is a longtime Japanese member. who's had 3 cancers since then, and she's Sydney-based. And then we've had Ian Thorpe, who got an award from FCA in 2022 for the Person of the Year award, and his portrait is there. And then there are, of course, as my fellow board member Barbara was mentioning, there are these watershed stories which made headlines in Europe and the rest of the world. Djokovic definitely was there. We did a podcast together with Barbara, and then the bushfires, Lind Cafe, and things like it was published in Brazil, and then the no vote, that was also big news overseas in Japan and other countries. So there is a cross-section of things. There are about 45 pieces there, which are prints, but then there are also videos and interviews of some of these founders and news items. So it is really fascinating there. But on that, we have something which is, where are we going now after 2025 and moving forward? So the central piece there, I thought of putting something there which is really, the youngster who passes through in the foyer there, or somebody goes there, sees a typewriter. It is an old typewriter. Obviously, it doesn't work. It was Peter Hadfield gave it to us, our president, and that is a central piece. And there is some documentation around that. That if somebody sees that today, who's 20 in their 20s, they really have to comprehend that, look, every news was sort of written on that typewriter. And it took time. It took time for live broadcasts. Like nothing like this was even available, what we're doing right now. And it took sometimes 2 weeks. And there were like VHS tapes. And the print used to take a lot of time. So the tools have changed, but the journalism hasn't.
The game's changed, but the passion's still there.
That's right. So if we can convey that message, and hopefully if there can be some learnings out of that, to value the accuracy of news and fact checking is still as relevant as it was 40 years ago.
Just quickly, Raj, what do people need to know, when and where?
Well, this is at UTS at Broadway, the main building, the 70s skyscraper. It is right in the front on the foyer. Turn left, and that is our exhibition. It starts from 14th of March, was yesterday, and it goes on till 28th of March. It's free. Anyone can go there during the uni times.
Fabulous. Raj, Barbara, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.